Now, earlier in your notes when we were talking about field names, I asked you to keep them as short as possible, to not include spaces, and to leave out S's. Every developer has their own style, and so as a database developer you have to establish your own style, and it really doesn't matter what your style is as long as you're consistent. I know that I always don't put spaces, don't put S's, and keep my field names short. So I can actually tell when somebody has actually changed something in my database because it's not my style. Now, the next property I want to show you is the caption property. And the caption property is handy when we are making our field names so short and so really unfriendly to look at. For example, if I click on Note, I might decide when they're actually viewing the table. Now let's do that actually. Hit the View button to the far left. The column headings reflect the field names. And so you can see Employee ID, Title of Courtesy, and if I hit the End key you can see Note. If I go back to the table design by hitting the View button, I want to give these certain fields a caption that's more user-friendly. So Note, I'm going to give it the caption Notes. And Dependent, I might give that the caption Children. I might also give Town City the caption Town/City. I might give Hire Date the caption Hire Date with a space. Birth date with a space, and job title with a space. So I'm entering a caption for each field that's user friendly. Last name, I might give that the caption Surname. First name, give it the caption First Space Name. Title of Courtesy, give that the caption Title Space of Courtesy. And Employee ID, I might just give that just the caption ID. So a caption is an alias or an alternative name that's user-friendly for the user to see, but isn't the real name of the field. So let's view the table in Datasheet view. So I'm just going to hit the View button. I'm going to save my changes yes. And you can see here that my Employee ID field now has the caption ID. My Title of Courtesy field now has the caption of Title of Courtesy. And so what I'm seeing is nice user-friendly captions appearing for each of my fields. And Notes as opposed to Note, and Children as opposed to Dependent. So what a caption does, and Town City as well, what a caption does is basically say this is a nice user-friendly way of showing the field, but it's not the true field name. So that's where access becomes a bit tricky, because what you see on the surface isn't necessarily the true name of the field. You need to be in the design of the table to see the true name of the field to be able to manipulate the field. Now, besides the caption property, the default value property is very good as well. For example, I might want the default Town City to always say Kawerau. So I'll click on Town City, I'll go down to the general properties and particularly the default value, and I'll type what I want it to come up with by default. Kawerau. I might decide that Dependent by default I want to see that come up with a 0. So I'll put 0. And let's go and check what that does. When I go to view the table in Datasheet and save yes, you'll notice as I go along here that Kawerau is showing by default for the Town City. They can still change that, but if 9 times out of 10 Kawerau is the Town City, it saves them a little bit of data entry. You can also see that Children has defaulted to 0. So that's quite handy as well. And I'll go back to the design of my table. The next two properties I want to show you are validation rule and validation text, and these work together. Let's say, for example, if I click on salary in the top half of my screen and I go to default validation rule in my field properties, I can apply a rule to salary. Let's say that nobody in the organisation is paid less than $20,000. So I'm going to put a rule that says the salary must be greater than, equal to, $20,000. That's my rule, and so that's going to insist that for the data to be valid, they must enter a value that's greater than or equal to 20,000. And if they don't, my validation text property is the error message that I want to come up if they break the rule. So I might put an error message that says salary must be at least 20,000. Please click OK and try again. And let's just go test that. So if I go back to viewing my table in Datasheet view, save yes, it feels compelled to tell me that the rules have been changed. And I have. I've just changed the rule now. So I just go yes. Now I go across to Joe Blogg's salary and I try to put in 10,000. As soon as I press enter, the salary must be at least 20,000. Please click OK and try again. So that's saying that the data I've entered into that field according to the validation rule is not valid. So I click OK and I press escape to drop it and my rule's working. And I go back to the design of the table. Let's enter another rule. For example, hire date. I might decide that any date that they put into this field must be in the past. We can't put a date that they were hired in the future. So I'm going to add a validation rule. The validation rule is going to be less than equal to today's date, which is a function called date, because that's a moving target. So any date that they enter into this field called hire date is only valid if it's a date that's less than or equal to today's date. And then the validation text is the error message I want to come up. The date entered cannot be in the future. Please re-enter the date. And let's test it. So I'm going back to viewing my table in Datasheet view. Save yes. The rules have changed, so yes. And I'll try and enter a date, hire date, that is, say, the 20th of the 12th, 2014. The date entered cannot be in the future. Please re-enter the date. So the data I've entered is not valid according to the validation rule. So I click OK and I press escape to drop it. And I go back to the design of my table by clicking the View button. So you can selectively apply a rule to each of these fields, or just certain fields, to make sure that the data they entered either is greater than, or less than, or is equal to one of a finite set of options.